is not about Kevin McCarthy anymore. And every night, as they're negotiating, and I just saw a story from the Hill newsletter, that they're getting closer, and he's getting in more. But let's talk about some of those things that he's getting in that none of us knew about. So he started off by saying, you know what? I'm going to allow a rule that you can't vote on anything until there's 72 hours that the bill has been in print. That's a good thing. Conservatives always wanted that. Didn't have it under Pelosi, or San Fran Yan, as I like to call her. And so this is good. And then the conservatives said, not good enough. Why? Because within the deal that McCarthy wanted from the conservatives was, oh, by the way, the Rules Committee can still do some exemptions of bills. In other words, 72-hour rule, null and void. They try to get away with that. There's something else that we hadn't known until the last few days. He runs something called the Leadership Fund. And we all knew he had this fund, and he'd been raising tens of millions for it to elect Republicans to office. That's a good thing. But it winds up that when there's a district that has an open seat with a Republican going to win in November, and there's a conservative running, he puts in a liberal or a moderate in the race and funds that campaign against the conservatives. And last night, he finally admitted he'd been doing it, and he said, I will sin no more, I will not do it again. Anybody trust him?
No.
Yeah. But it goes further than that. One of his lifelong goals has been to not only own the California Republican Party, but to be Speaker. So he went to work as a young man in the office of Assemblyman Bill Thomas in Bakersfield. And Bill Thomas hired him after he did an internship. And Kevin McCarthy calls Bill Thomas my surrogate father. Bill Thomas calls Kevin McCarthy the son I never had. That's the close relationship they had. A year ago, Bill Thomas did a TV spot interview in which he talked about the duplicity of Kevin McCarthy. And I put that in my newsletter, and I was shocked. Then, just before Christmas, Vanity Fair did a background piece on Kevin McCarthy, and they did a whole section on Bill Thomas, the surrogate father, who called his son a liar, a cheat, a manipulator, and somebody you can't trust. And that's from somebody who considers his father.
Thanks, Dad.
No matter what the members of Congress think of it. And over the last couple of weeks, it has come out about nobody in Congress trusts his word. He is a manipulator. He has no policy. One of the most interesting things that Bill Thomas said, and I've been saying this for years about Kevin McCarthy. I've known him close to 30 years now. And I will tell you that what I said back then is what I say now. He's an administrator. He's a manipulator. He is not a policy person. And Bill Thomas and now several others in Congress are now spilling the beans that Kevin McCarthy doesn't talk about policy. He only talks about politics. He is not interested in policy. I will say he usually votes right. That's good. But you don't see him promoting legislation. You don't see him helping the caucus pass legislation. You only see him leading the battle for the Republican Party to win Congress so he could become Speaker. Now, all of this is bad. But, you know, every time there's something really bad, there's also something really good that comes out of the bad. And I know we have a lot of rain, or there's some sunshine at the end of the day on this. We all know Senator Rick Scott of Florida. I like him. I think he's great. He challenged Mitch McConnell to be leader of the Republicans in the Senate. Either last night or this morning, Rick Scott made a statement that he's using his political money to do TV and radio ads around the nation in order to change the Republican Party. And he's proud of the fact that he ran against McConnell. And that's an important position, that we have a senator of the quality of Rick Scott, former governor of the state of Florida, taking a position that he is going to change the Republican Party nationally. That takes care of McConnell. All of these deals that are being made with McCarthy makes McCarthy, at the end of the day, and I do believe he still will become Speaker, but he will be a eunuch. He will have no powers whatsoever except to hold the gavel. He won't be able to appoint chairs. He won't be able to appoint committee members without permission of the Republican caucus. That's a big deal. He now will be watched to see how he spends his political money. That's a good thing. There's a whole series of things. He's going to be forced to change his attitude on the 72-hour rule with the exemption from the Rules Committee. And by the way, he's going to now have to appoint more real conservatives to the Rules Committee. That's a good thing. And for those who aren't aware of the way Congress operates, nothing gets on the floor of the House without a rule from the Rules Committee. Why is that important? One of the things that the conservatives have been asking for, which we have not had under Pelosi, is the right to make amendments on the floor. So if you're not a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, for instance, you can't go on the floor and make an amendment under the current situation. Under the negotiations, you will be able to do that, so every member can have a say on foreign affairs, or national defense, or agriculture, or the environment, or any of the other myriad of congressional committees. That is a big statement. So we have McCarthy. One of the people that's going to be harmed the most by this fight, win or lose for McCarthy, is not only Mitch McConnell, but Ronna McDaniel. Because people are beginning to, somebody who wants to talk to me. You will see that people are beginning to say, we need complete change in the party. That's what Rick Scott is doing. And that's an important thing. And the biggest thing of all of that is going to come up, I believe, on the 16th of January, if they have a speaker, or shortly thereafter, and that is the bill to raise the debt ceiling. Congress has to pass it. And now the Congress, the Republicans realize they have the power not to pass the debt ceiling without a series of amendments. What type of amendments? Ending the 87,000 IRS duties.
Yeah.
Firing the corrupt members of the FBI. And I apologize.
Yeah.
I apologize for that obscenity using those letters, but please. The fact that that bill to raise the ceiling will also come with a balanced budget provision. Now, as Larry Kudlow said today, we don't know exactly what that means anymore, a balanced budget, but just getting the idea that there's no further tax increases, that they are now on hold after the debt ceiling passes, and they got to pass the debt ceiling, because sometime in February or March, we run out of money, which isn't a bad thing either. You know, if you don't have it, you shouldn't be spending it. And that's how we operate. Why shouldn't the government do it? And so the debt ceiling is going to be the first big challenging vote for the Republicans. Yes, they're going to pass a separate standalone bill to repeal the 87,000 IRS folks, They'll have a provision to create a hearing on fascist Fauci. They'll have one on cocaine hunter Biden. They'll have one on Joe Biden. There's going to be a whole series. There's one, the Judiciary Committee is planning on the corruption of the FBI, the CIA, the Department of Justice, and Homeland Security for rigging elections and for censoring Americans. And as I think it was Greg Gutfeld the other night said, yeah, Elon Musk bought himself a criminal syndicate. And you know, I thought about it, and he's right. Twitter is a criminal syndicate. But what concerns me is we're talking about Twitter and all the corruption. Why aren't we talking about Facebook and their corruption, and Instagram and their corruption, and YouTube and their corruption? All of that's going to be heard by the chair of the House Judiciary Committee, Jim Jordan. And I trust Jordan to do the job right. So on a national level, we are moving in the right direction. And you know, we keep hearing, there was, I don't know if any of you watched the TV show Westwood. I watched every episode. It was so well written and so precise to actually how politics works in Washington, like it or not. But the chief aide to the chief of staff to the president was a character called Leo McGarry. Remember him? He finally died at the end of the series. And in real life, he then died. And he had a statement. He says, you know, when things last overnight, it's entertainment. When it lasts 2 nights, you look like an idiot. Well, we're going into the 4th night. But you know what? We're not idiots. This is how democracy operates. People have the right to speak out. The Democrats never allowed that. You notice 212, every vote for the election denier, who still denies Trump won the election in 2016, Hakeem Jeffries, who's a racist. That's the leader of the Democrat Party. What would you expect different from the Democrats? The historic racist party in America. They defended slavery. They created Jim Crow. They created segregation laws. Woodrow Wilson, the so-called progressive who gave us socialism, the first socialist president, he segregated the government and the military. How more racist could it be? Oh, besides that, he revitalized, in the Democrat National Committee, revitalized a group called the KKK. This is the Democrat Party. And even today, they don't believe that black people and Hispanics are smart enough to go to college or get a job or to own a business without the government forcing people to do that. The Democrat Party thinks women are so incapable that they have to pass laws forcing you. And I don't even want to talk about LGBTQR, whatever it is. I mean, the craziness of all that they're forcing on us and our kids. So let's talk about California. And you have to start with Harvey Dillon. Well, I wouldn't be applauding too quickly.
Nope.
The day after New Year's, I received a phone call from some members of the Virginia, I called it the State Central Committee, and they said, we are not a state, we're a Commonwealth. Okay. So the Virginia Commonwealth Republican State Party. And they wanted to know about Harvey Dillon. And I am way too old to be Southern. I mean, I started, my first precinct, John, was when I walked precincts in 1960 for Richard Nixon for president. So Tom and Carl isn't too far off. I've been around since before the Beatles. The singing group and maybe even the life form, I'm not sure anymore. Harvey Dillon was elected vice chair of the Republican Party in March of 2013. What was the first action of the state party when she was vice chair? Stop voter registration. She never spoke up against it. She's never spoke up in favor of it until now that she's running for RNC chair. You may have heard me say or read my newsletter that Jessica Patterson gets paid $250,000 a year, while the Democrat chair, who wins, gets paid $127,500. What does that have to do with Harmeet? She's the chair of the CRP Board Compensation Committee that recommends that Jessica, win or lose, gets $250,000 a year. I could go on with other stuff about Harmeet. All that being said, I've not endorsed her. I've not endorsed Ronna McDaniel. Harmeet will be better than McDaniel by that much. She's not part of the Washington establishment. That's the saving grace of Harmeet. But trust me when I say you're not going to get much change. Because if she's complaining about the lack of leadership in the Republican Party nationally, everything she says about Ronna McDaniel can be said about Jessica Patterson. In fact, the lead story in my newsletter tomorrow is, with a headline, is Harmeet Dillon talking about Ronna McDaniel or Jessica Patterson or both. In a, I believe it was Politico article a couple days ago, she talked about the lack of leadership, the lack of respect for the grassroots, and she went on and on about all the terrible things that Ronna McDaniel had not done or did incorrectly. And I read it, and I thought, she's describing Jessica Patterson and the CRP board. Not only Ronna McDaniel, but also the state Republican Party. And so I'm asking the question, when will she come out against Jessica Patterson for the same reason she's against Ronna McDaniel? So if you talk to her, ask her that question. Why does she dislike McDaniel for doing these things, but says nothing about her home state, what she's supposed to be representing on the board of directors of the CRP? So that's the big deal. So where are we with the state? There are 40 members of the state Senate. We have 8. 75%, over 75% are Democrats. But let me tell you about the 9th seat, the 4th Senate District, which is up in El Dorado County, a little bit of Placer, I believe, and the Tahoe area and that area of California. It is a +4 Republican seat. It was built for a Republican state Senate. So, the primary comes last June. Congressman George Radonovich, former Congressman George Radonovich, is a good friend of mine. He's running. Steve Bailey, our nominee in 218 for Attorney General, also a good friend. He's running. And there's another guy by the name of McKay running as a Republican. Don't know him. So there's 3 Republicans, and there's 5 or 6 other wannabes running as Republicans. There are 2 Democrats on the ballot. Okay? So Scott Wilk, who is the minority leader in the state Senate, has to choose Radonovich, Bailey, who did he pick? Using Republican money, donated by good Republicans, he spent $53,000 on Tim Robertson. Everybody here knows Tim, right? Tim was endorsed by the California Democrat Party, by the unions. He was the union candidate, the Democrat Party candidate, and that's who Scott Wilk endorsed with Republican money and sent out mailers telling people to vote for Tim Robertson. The bad news, that's not bad enough. Tim Robertson lost in the general against another Democrat who is the AOC of the male sex. He's a progressive nut. And now we have representing Republicans, a progressive nut in a Republican district, thanks to Scott Will. And what did Jessica Patterson have to say about all this? Crickets. Nothing. As you remember, we have, for those who are involved with the state party, since 2008, 2012, 2016, and 2020, when we passed a state platform, or the years before those numbers, we passed a state platform that gives us the ability to say we are a pro-life party. And the California Republican Party, in the platform, we are pro-life. Who was the one on the floor of those conventions trying to take the pro-life plank out of the platform? Jessica Patterson. Full disclosure, and I hope Greg isn't upset with this, I live 1.5 miles from her. And any of you visit the Reagan Library? Yeah. Do you know that when you go up that winding road, you go past Jessica's house? So every time you go see the Reagan Library, you're passing her home. She lives right there on Roosevelt Court, the first street off of Madera, and you go up there to the Reagan Library. So, the Supreme Court repealed Roe v. Wade. We were all happy. It's in the Republican platform. Did any of you read the press release of Jessica Patterson congratulating the fact that the Republican Party of California stood strong for the pro-life measure and we got to what we wanted, the repeal of Roe v. Wade? Any of you read that press release? There was none. She was silent. She wouldn't even talk to the press as to speaking on behalf of the Republican Party in California. She wouldn't even say that we are a pro-life party. Now, I once worked for Rudy Giuliani when he ran for president. And the person who had the office next to mine was Jessica Patterson. And the first day we showed up at the office, we took a look at each other, and we were assigned offices. We didn't pick offices. The guy in charge just said, this is your office, this is your office. So I went to mine, and there comes Jessica going to the office right next to me. So at the lunchtime, we met and we agreed to disagree personally, but we're working for Giuliani, so we'll keep our disagreements to ourselves. And pretty much he did that, and I certainly did as well. But at some point in time, we as a Republican Party have to make a determination what we're going to be when we grow up. Do we want to continue losing? And why do we lose? The best example is not too far from here, the 71st Assembly District. Almost unanimously, the Orange County Central Committee endorsed a lady by the name of Katie Sanchez. About 60%, just under 60% of the Riverside, the other part of the district, Central Committee, endorsed Katie Sanchez. Matt Rain, the Republican, did I say Republican? He donated 8 times to Obama. Can he still be a Republican? No. Anyway, he was running. He's a city councilman in Temecula. The CRA in Temecula voted to endorse Katie Sanchez over their hometown city councilman. The state party did not endorse, or at least the board did. Jessica continued to send out email after email asking people to raise money for Matt Rain, to help him, say what a wonderful person he is. Never a good word about Katie Sanchez. She was outspent 5-1. She had the Republican Party of California against her. Mm-hmm. And she still beat Matt Rain. Good. That is what we have to do. What did she do? The same thing that Josh Hoover, who's also a good friend of mine, who was chief of staff to Kevin Kiley. And when Kiley ran for governor of the recall, I was the political director for Kevin Kiley's election. And so I got to know Josh, who I knew before, real well. Josh was a good, solid conservative. He raised $1.7 million. The Democrat incumbent raised $4.3 million. So Josh got outspent. How did he win? The way John Berry would tell him. You walk door to door. You walk the precincts. You walk the neighborhoods. He built a team of precinct operation that won the election for him. He won, I think, by 1,300 votes. Close enough. But this is a 5% plus Democrat district. And a Republican won. A Republican won against an incumbent, and against an incumbent who'd been there for 5 terms, and who outspent him by more than 2.5 to 1. And Josh still won. And he kept his principles in that race. He was pro-life and is pro-life. He didn't hide that. And all the other things, he believed in school choice. And he spoke about school choice. He didn't hide that. But what he did do is talk to enough people door to door, as people did, to let them know where he stands. And he wasn't ashamed to say what his positions were. So I want to end this by, what can you do? The first thing is, we need to start now, in January of 2023, finding candidates for city council and school board for 2024. And I'll give you a timeline. You need to have those people in place no later than July 4th, 2023. You will need, through the end of the year, to build an organization and a team. I'm part of an organization, I'm leader of an organization, as is Davina Kaiser, who's here tonight from the Long Beach area. And she's on our board as well. And we are planning to put on training sessions for candidates for Central Committee. I'll get to that in a moment. Candidates for school board, candidates for city council, and for legislative action. And we're going to do that in the spring and the summer of 2023. We want to, when January 1st, a year from now, comes, that we have our candidates ready to start walking precincts and to start going to community organizations. They should do it throughout 2023, so they're really known by the time January 1st, 2024 comes. And by the time November of 2024 comes, we're there. The second part is, and I don't want to talk specifically about San Bernardino County Central Committee, but I am in San Bernardino. And by the way, one of the reasons when Greg called me to speak here, I said, I'm always glad to come out to Redlands, because I'm a graduate of the University of Redlands. And so I'm always proud to come out to my hometown. And so we need to start the practice now of finding people to run for Central Committee and train them on how to run the County Central Committee, so that when December 12th, I believe, is the deadline. That's right. September 9th or 10th to December 12th of 2023, you're able to register to file for Central Committee. And the election is going to be in March of 2024, because it's a presidential election. And so we have the ability to elect people not only in San Bernardino County, but in other counties as well, in order to take back, I don't say take over because I don't want to take it over, I want to take it back. The County Central Committee in San Bernardino, LA County, Alameda County, every county in the state. And we're going to be running candidates for Central Committee in every county for every seat in all 58 counties. This is how we're going to change the Republican Party. Rick Scott is going to be doing the ads. Harmeet Dillon is now speaking the truth. We are going to do it on the level that we know best, the grassroots, whether it's the County Central Committee, school board, And why is school board so important? The San Juan Capistrano Unified School District, which is the southern part of Orange County, and there's going to be a fun kicker to this one, has the 4th or 5th largest school district in the state. The superintendent has been promoting the sexual grooming of kids, CRT, and other liberal stuff. And on November 8th, the voters voted out the leftists on the school board, and conservatives took over. That was on November 8th. And as you know, it takes a little while for the votes to be certified and all that. On the 22nd of December, the new school board held an emergency meeting, and they fired the superintendent.
Ooh, yes.
That's not the kicker. Would you like to know the name of the superintendent? Dr. Brulte, Jim Brulte's wife. Oh, she's a liberal Democrat. Nice lady. I mean, I've met her a few times. She's really a really nice lady, but not one who should be in charge of children. But that will tell you, in Temecula, one of the first things the new school board did there is get rid of CRT. And we are making a difference. And let me go back to Harmeet and Jessica. This is my problem. You may have been receiving emails that say, give money to Parents Revolt. We need to elect people to the school boards. Well, yeah, that's true. They raised hundreds of thousands of dollars. But they waited to the 22nd of October in which to endorse candidates for school board, 2 weeks after the ballots came out. So they endorsed dozens and dozens of candidates all over the state. They raised hundreds of thousands of dollars. Do you know how much they spent on the school board candidates they endorsed? Nothing. Zero. They used it for their own salaries and overhead. They lied. And the question they lied to all of the donors, and they lied to the Republican Party. Now the question is, where was Harmeet? As it just works out, I don't go to Christmas parties. I don't like parties at all, with a small p as opposed to the big party. I was invited to a Christmas dinner with about 14 people in Northridge, just before Christmas, and one of the other guests was Greg Andrew. He's the treasurer of the CRP. Greg, how much money did the CRP give to the candidates? Nothing. And he's the treasurer. He's the guy that goes over every check. Nothing. Then I said, you know, Peter Quo, who's the vice chair, and Jessica are claiming the state party has registered, since she's been chair, over 500,000 new Republicans. And I've been monitoring all of those numbers once a month from the Secretary of State's office. There's nothing to show that. So I said, Greg, 4 years, how many Republicans did the state party register? Over a 4-year period, under 5,000. So a friend of mine was on the phone with her the other day, didn't know that her friend was also my friend, and my friend said, what about this difference between the 5,000 and 500? Well, you don't understand. We did. Well, how? Well, when John Barry moves to Rialto from Fontana, he has to re-register. When Mrs. Jones gets divorced and marries Smith, she's now Mrs. Smith, she needs to re-register. Jessica's taking credit for people who are doing it on the natural. But how many people did the state party with their so-called bounty program pay for in the past 4 years? Under 5,000. That's barely enough to change some of the bigger cities in San Bernardino. That much less the whole state. So why hasn't Harmeet spoken out about it? Why is Jessica lying about it? So these are the things that go through my mind in the middle of the night. I wonder why I can't sleep. But we have a responsibility. We have the responsibility to be the grassroots, the productive grassroots. You know, Greg may have some ideas. I may disagree with him a little bit here. Strategy, I may have some different strategies with Agnes. But that doesn't mean that at the end of the day we're not all going to work together. And we're going to do it as a team for the common cause of the American Constitution,
That's right.
our basic freedoms,